Hi everyone, I'm JD. Welcome back to my channel. Keanu's just climbing up my leg. So I'm going to try and cuddle him as I chat about my drawings. We're up to art series, or art stories number 9, I think now. Getting towards the end, I think. And yeah, so alright, this one is called Poured Out in Abundance, and all about how God just pours all of these things out on us. And I mean, it's for free, and there's nothing we have to do for it, and we have access to this all the time. So to joy, rest, love, blessing, strength, laughter, favor, grace, wisdom, fruit, freedom, creativity, inheritance, purpose, peace, the kingdom of God, righteousness, heaven, delight, goodness, hope, and meaning. He just gives that. He's the source of all these things, and he freely gives these out to us in abundance. Like, not just a little bit, but just everything he has. He pours out everything he has. He doesn't hold back any little bit. So that's a very simple message there. And then this one is called Doors of Delight, and it is about how I got this kind of revelational insight that the doors were open, and that God was just wanting to pour out delight onto me, into my life. And you know, I didn't have to feel guilty about it. I didn't have to reject it or that kind of thing, or feel inadequate, or feel like I have to earn it or work my way for it to pay it off or anything. And that can be quite hard to do that, to learn to accept what he has for us and his delight and joy. And I'm still on the journey of learning how to do this, but especially back then when he first gave me this insight, I was like, well, how do I do that? And he was showing me all these doors and just saying, you know, choose which doors you want to walk through, because you get to choose. You know, you can, if I don't know, reading makes you happy, go read a book. If music makes you happy, go put on a song, you know. So I had to kind of go, I don't know, back to basics a little bit, and just know I had permission to do these things without feeling guilty, simply because God gives us life and he gives us each of these things. Like, I feel like sometimes we can make things secular and some things spiritual, when actually God is in, you know, everything. He's in the reading of the books, he's in the singing of music, and he's in nature, and he's in dogs when you finding joy in your dog. Like, so there's no need to feel guilty that you're, I don't know, playing with your dog. That's a place where you can see God and engage with him and connect with him. So enjoy it. This picture here is called Be Your Own Cheerleader. And so this is one of those struggles that was constant throughout my life, that whole negative self-talk of, you know, you're an idiot, you're such a fool, to no one likes you, you'll never fit in, to, oh, you can't do that, or don't say anything, or don't do that, or whatever it is. And this was just, I'm getting better at this, much better. I'm much better at catching myself when I have these thoughts and stopping them. I used to, at the worst, play them over and over like 100 times a day. Every single second they were running through my head, and when that happens, it really destroys you, because you're just destroying yourself. And so I had to pull myself up on it and go, nope, I have to, as hard as it may be, stop that thought, and I'll do whatever else I can do to just stop thinking that thought. And then one time I was driving home at night, and in the car I just realized, oh, I'm having these bad thoughts about myself again. And I got this insight in that moment. A book was brought back to me. I think it was called Uninvited by Lisa Turkhust. I don't know how you say it. I'm not sure how you say it. Hang on, just getting stuff away from my kitty. My little Keanu. There was this thing that happened in the book where she said something mean about herself, and this random stranger just said to her, how dare you speak to yourself like that? Not in a horrible way, just in a sorry, moving some things around. just in a convicting way. And it felt like that guy, that stranger, was talking to me through that book. And his voice came to me in this moment when I was driving home and saying, how dare you speak to yourself like that? And then it made me think about how, you know, I've got friends in my life who I would never, ever speak to like that, let alone strangers. But especially friends, even if they did something wrong, even if they stuffed up, and they would be saying things like, oh my gosh, I made this horrible mistake, I can never go outside again, oh my gosh, it was terrible. As much as I understand how they're feeling, I would still go, no, you're awesome, go outside. And I would cheer them on and only see their good qualities. And I just realised, well, I really need to see myself that same way. And okay, it's alright to have these moments where I'm like, oh, that was no good, and oh, I'm such an idiot. But then to go, hang on a minute, be my own friend, be my own cheerleader, cheering me on and saying, well, yeah, okay, you made that mistake and you may feel like this, but hey, you're awesome, you're created by God, you're his masterpiece, you know, keep going. So it's kind of like that idea of two people on my shoulder, and one is cheering me on and the other one is saying, oh, you're no good and you can't do anything and all this stuff. And for me to recognize that there is this person. Like before, I only thought there was this one, but now I know this one is here too, and I kind of have a responsibility, I suppose, to be my own cheerleader, to be my own friend to myself. This one is called Faith or Trust. And the next few drawings are part of a series, and are very specific. So we had a cyclone here in Bowen, and it was a category 4. And at the time, you know, it was my first major cyclone, and only one so far, really. Thank goodness. And yeah, it was quite scary. In the days leading up to it, people were barricading their doors and preparing their house for the cyclone, and people were getting money out and going to the shops and stocking up on food. And to me, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I'm glad that people did this, because if it was up to me, I would have had no clue how to prepare. Because what happened was, so Tuesday came around, and we moved to higher ground, because where I am, it's close to the coastline, and the cyclone came at a time when there was a king tide as well, so there's worries that the houses near the coastline would flood with that tide and cyclone. So we just moved to higher ground and stayed at a place on a hill. And then I spent, it was interesting because the Tuesday, that's when the cyclone hit, but it was a very, very slow moving one. So everyone was saying it lasted forever. And so people were like, oh, we can go home Tuesday night. No. Actually, I think we left on Monday morning. So then we had, Monday waiting it out, because if you waited till Tuesday, it could be too late to leave. So we left on Monday. And so we stayed there Monday night, and then we're thinking, oh, we can leave after the cyclone on Tuesday. But no, the power was out, and it was just pouring with rain, and there was stuff everywhere. My dad actually tried to get back home, and he came back to the house and said, it's like, what did they say? He said something like, it's like the end of the world out there, and not safe to be out there. Because there were trees down, there were power lines down. You couldn't get through the roads anyway because, the trees and the power lines were down. But yeah, I remember I spent my the Monday night, just reading Twitter, really, and just seeing all the reports and watching the cyclone on the BOM, the Bureau of Meteorology, and getting a little bit scared, I suppose, about... It was saying reports like this cyclone could flatten Bowen. I was like, oh my gosh, that's not good. What was I going to say? So, I don't know. Anyway, I got to this point though where I was just like, well, okay, even if we all died, this is where my head goes, right? Even if we all died, it would still be okay, and I can have peace because I believe in God's glory. I believe that he can work good out of anything, no matter how bad it may be. And I just trusted that even out of a cyclone or a natural disaster or anything, that he would be glorified. And if I died, well, whatever, because it's about God being glorified. And I just came to that point, like, of course I don't, want to die, but for me, I don't know, all life is about God being glorified, and I just saw that no matter the situation, and it just reassured me in all situations, in all the world, whatever is going on, no matter how bad, yet God can turn it to good and he will be glorified. Meaning, not like when you say that, it can kind of seem like, oh God, he gets all the glory. Well, what a proud, selfish God he is. I don't want anything to do with him. But when you see glory in its pureness, it's his goodness. So if he's glorified, it's because he's pouring out his goodness. So if everything else is just bad, God gets no glory in that. When he turns around for good, then he gets the glory. So he is so for us. He is for every single person in the world. And he is just pouring out his goodness into everyone and wants goodness for everyone, and that's his plan. It may not look like it in certain situations and at certain times, but he is working all things together for good, and one day there will only be good, and that's good for us. Like, we get the goodness and he gets the glory. This one is about the cyclone. And so, yeah, I spent Tuesday, because the power went off Monday night, and then the power was off for a week. I've never experienced that before. I mean, I've experienced power outages that only last, a day or a night max, not for a whole week. Anyway, so this Tuesday I just spent it in front of the window watching the cyclone. And yeah, it got really windy. The place where we were staying, some panes of glass from the outdoor patio, they smashed. And yeah, I saw things flying around out there. The fence kind of fell down of the next door neighbour. I saw that fall down. But we were fine. The house was fine. Everything was fine. We were all safe. Not everyone was as lucky. Some people did lose their houses, but this just represents that amidst that whole wind and rain, we were safe, and that it was, God keeping us safe. I felt safe with God, and that I don't know, the people who took us in, who invited us to their house as well, it was just like something to be thankful for. We were all safe together in this house, and yeah, that's just kind of what that represents, the thankfulness and safety, being with God and with each other. And then this one, so the next night, right, we got home finally on the Wednesday, and then everyone's like, oh, it's over, cool, we can get back to normal now. But still, the power is out, and everyone is, washing their clothes in the sink by hand, and having cold showers, and we can't have warm food. There's no warm meals. We were having sardines on toast, and for the first day I was like, oh, this is really exciting, and then after that I'm like, this is really not fun. And you'd go to the shops, because they would have generators so they could have power, or some of them anyway, and there'd just be no bread and no cheese, no milk, no biscuits, no chips. It was so eerie. You just walk in and there's nothing on the shelves, and the only things were on the shelf were things like sardines. So sardines we had. It was so eerie. So that's why I'm so glad people prepared. They got money out already, and they got food. And it got to the point where, yeah, because the water here isn't really drinkable, so we all drink bottled water here, and yeah, we couldn't get water because the shops had no water. And so the army came down, because they in Townsville, and they stayed in Bowen for a while and handed out bottles of water to us all. And all these things, so thankful. I'm getting sidetracked. Let me get onto this picture. So Wednesday night, it poured. It flooded. It literally flooded. The whole house was surrounded by water, and the rain didn't stop. And I remember my dad and I were in the lounge room watching the storm through the window and enjoying it. We're like, oh, did you hear that thunder? And look at that lightning. And we're sitting in pitch black because there's no power. And then oh, I just thank God for this. It must have, I see it as him who made this happen. I just thought, oh, I'm going to go outside. You know, it's nighttime. Why would I want to do that? But I was like, I'm going to go outside onto the deck and just see what things are like. Went outside and saw that the garage was flooding, and, you know, both our cars are in the garage, and the water was up to my door. And I'm like, Dad, there's water in the garage. And so my dad went out, and, you know, the water's up to his knees, and he moved. Thankfully, the cars started, and he moved them to higher ground. Water did get into my car. When he opened the door, water went in. But, I mean, they started and they're fine. Like, the cars still work today. I mean, how amazing is that? If we left it any longer, who knows, they probably wouldn't be working. And so I just think, praise God, right, that for whatever reason, I went outside at that moment. And then, you know, because that we didn't realize how high the water was getting. The water was getting to the second step of the deck. If it got any higher and past the next step, well, that's the deck, and then it would have come underneath the door. And then, praise God again, for some reason I just went to my room and I noticed my floor was flooded. It wasn't deep. It didn't even reach up to my ankles, but enough to be like the floor was covered in water. And then it was all hands on deck. We were bucketing water in the house till like 1 a.m. So the whole bottom part of the house was water came in through the bottom door. So that garage, there's a door from the garage to the bottom part of the house, and the water was coming through the door. Even though my dad had blocked it up, it still seeped in some places. And there were leaks in my bathroom, the toilet, underneath the pipes, the water from underneath the house. So the whole underneath of the house was just filled up with water. And it was coming up through the pipes in my bathroom. So, you know, it's pouring, the rain is, the flood is getting higher, and there's this leaking pipe. And so I was freaking out. It was one of the most scary times of my life. I don't know why, because rationally, like, it wouldn't have gone any higher. But in my mind, you know, just worst case scenario, I was thinking about that king tide and the cyclone, and thinking, what if the flood reaches to the ceiling, you know? So yeah, I was like fearing for my life almost, kind of thing. But there was, looking back, there was absolutely no point fearing for my life. It was more just fearing for the house. And so yeah, I had to move stuff off my floor. Some books got ruined. Some of my journals got wet. Thankfully, they didn't get too bad to be thrown out, but some of my books had to be thrown out. Thankfully, yeah, I went down to my room and caught it in time and moved everything off my floor. And yeah, so we're bucketing, and the story behind this picture is that I have never prayed so hard in my entire life. And I just kept praying and praying for like hours. We were praying, and the stress levels were through the roof. I mean, and it got to this point where it's dark, and I've just been bucketing water, and I'm tired and stressed, and the rain just kept pouring heavier, and it would be like, oh no. Every time it got heavy, we're like, oh no, and just groaned. And I just remember thinking, I don't care how hard it rains, I'm going to pray harder. And I've never been like that before. I've never had a situation where I've had to be like that before. But yeah, I kind of felt weary and like giving in, and almost defeat. I felt defeated every time that rain got harder. I was just like, oh, what's the point? You know, and there's no point. It's just going to come, and it's going to be hopeless or whatever. But I resolved in myself, and it was really interesting to see this come out. I resolved in myself, no matter how hard it rained, I'm going to believe by faith that my prayers are heard and God will answer them. And so I got this vision of myself being like Aaron and Moses, and how when I can't remember too exactly how the story goes, but when Aaron held up Moses' hands, their army won, but when his arms went down, the other army won. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be Aaron, and I'm going to hold up my hands, and I'm going to be Moses, and I'm going to pray so hard, no matter how much the army, the flood, comes and how devastating it looks. I'm going to pray this thing out, and I'm going to be a warrior, and I'm going to believe that, you know, my prayers are heard. So that's that story. A very interesting time. And yeah, thankfully the rain did stop eventually, and the flood went down. thankfully. I remember afterwards, I got a bit of anxiety when it rained. Anytime I heard rain, my body just naturally just went into panic mode a little bit, because it, stored that memory of how scary that night was. And eventually, like over time, the rain wasn't so much, and my body learned, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of, and I'm good now with rain. But yeah, it was really interesting just to know that's how much of an effect it had on me, so that anytime when it rained after the cyclone, I was just like, oh no, panicking. So yeah, it was a full-on time. So let me go on with that story. This continues it on. This is the last picture in the series. For that 1 week, we're without power. For 3 or 4 or 5 days, we were without water. Oh, so that's why we couldn't get water anyway. So we couldn't do anything without water either. And thankfully they turned the water on, so that was good. And then it was a whole week before we got power. But in that time, it was like living in a third world country, because it was like being so isolated. You couldn't watch the news. You didn't know what was going on. You didn't know what the whole country was doing. You didn't know what was going on in your own region. It was really weird. And everyone talked about how it brought the communities together, as like neighbours would help each other out. Our neighbours gave us their generator so we could charge our phones, and the shops sold so many phone chargers for cars and lights, electronic lights, with battery operated lights. I mean, my goodness. But the way that people helped each other out and helped cut down trees, and it was really good that way. But at the same time, what I'm trying to say, it felt very isolated, being cut off from the world, having no power, and kind of going back to the Stone Age almost. And I just remember, this has nothing to do with this, by the way, but I just want to feel like I need to share this story. I just remember the night before the cyclone, I was reading all the Twitter. It was a hot topic, the cyclone, and some people were saying, why are they sending so much money to Bowen? I mean, there's so many bigger problems in the world that Australia needs to fix in Australia, let alone, the rest of the world. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. Fair point. But then, when I went through this, I was like, we had the Navy, the Army come to us with water. We had the SCS or whatever. We had every crew in Queensland, it felt like, of Ergon come to us to fix the power lines. We had mobile washing services come, and people setting up sausages, barbecuing for us. Because my pastor even said, as soon as she drove past the barbecue, she's like, stop, break, we need a sausage, because it's just like so good to have hot food. And so it got to that point, where we were just really appreciative of the help that people were pouring into us, all hands on deck, just coming to help us out with shelter, food, and water, and washing clothes, and a hot meal. And it just made me think how, yes, send money, send resources, send people, because I was feeling isolated and alone, and it was just very, very comforting to know that the country cared. I mean, it sounds sort of dramatic, but to know that the country cared and were helping us out. It was really, really nice. We were in need, like, I've never been in need like that, to that kind of degree, physically, with no power, no water, that kind of stuff. And so it just gave me a greater appreciation of people living in third world countries, and the responsibility we have to help them out in their poverty, in their lack of water and food, and all shelter and clothing. And it gave me a whole new appreciation of the emergency relief groups. So I committed to, straight away, I just donated money to the Red Cross and, I don't know, UNICEF or whatever, and Oxfam, because I just saw these people all came to Bowen to help us when we needed help. So now I need to help others in need with natural disasters and poverty. And now, with my giving $50 or $55 now to a different charity every month, I make sure every year, at least one of those months, it goes to a natural disaster cause. And I've already done that this year with the Townsville flood relief, but also to a poverty or something, just to the charities who help with emergency relief. So that was eye-opening, an eye-opening experience. Alright. But going on to this one, okay, so finally, you know, we had this week of rain and wind and no power, and the day that I looked outside and saw the sun, and the night I looked out and actually saw stars, oh my gosh, it was just like, it made me appreciate simple pleasures. So this is actually called simple pleasures. It's only when something is taken away that you realize how important it is and how valuable it is. And of course I love the stars and I love the sun anyway, but when I didn't have it for a week, I really saw how much I loved it. And so just seeing the stars, I was like, wow. And just seeing sun break through the sky, I was like, wow. And now, yeah, I take it for granted now. I've gone back to the way I've always been because it's always there. But this just reminds me, simple pleasures. Oh wow, what a journey that whole thing was. You know what, I think I may end it there for this series because I feel like that was really good to talk about that, not just to share my artwork, but I kind of wanted to write down my experience with the cyclone, and I never did, just to help me process it, help me to capture what I learnt from it, because I think it's really important to keep those lessons in mind. And I never did. It was, I don't know, too hard, or I don't know, too busy. So in some small way I've now got it out there in the world, recorded for me to always go back to this story behind the cyclone, captured in drawings, and now me sharing it here. So yeah, I'm glad I could do that, kind of get that off my chest, I suppose. Yeah, so that is my artwork for this series. I'll link the playlist below for the other videos in this series if you want to check those out. And yeah, I will come back and I'll film the next lot. I don't know, I've still got quite a few. Yeah, okay, this might take a while. But once I get all these done, it'll be something else that is, you know, off my chest, so it's always there recorded if I need to refer back to it. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have any thoughts on anything, on the cyclone, I don't know, life, general, art, creativity, anything. Share your stories. Love hearing your stories. Love hearing from you. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.